Hello, Merry Meet. So today I want to discuss a topic that a lot of urban witches and other occultists have an issue with, and that is how do you get rid of sacrifices? And I'm sure some people will watch exactly to this point and then go screaming about human sacrifice, but no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about rice, wine, milk, honey, and other generally pieces of food articles, sometimes flowers and such that we give gods, spirits, and energies to both worship and also as payment for help and so on and so forth. So, most books will tell you that when you, for example, sacrifice rice to the gods, which I do every day, you should bury it or burn it. The problem is that a lot of urban homes, such as, for example, the apartment I live in, don't have a garden and it doesn't have a fireplace. Now, when I grew up, when I first started working magic, I had it pretty good. I lived in a suburban area, and there were this big garden outside our home, and we also had actually two fireplaces in our home. So it was pretty easy to dispose of things that way. But now that I live in an apartment, things get a bit more difficult. So here's some advice. If you don't leave sacrifices very often, then, excuse me, my phone. If you don't leave sacrifices very often, then you can, of course, dig it down into if it's food articles or flowers that will become compost. You can add it to the dirt of potted plants and so on and so forth. Or if it's generally dry things like rice, you can have a special pot and store it there and then go out into the forest and burn, or if it's legal at that point, or dig it down when you have the chance. For me, however, that hasn't worked because, like I said, I do this every day. So for me, I toss it in the garbage. Now, before you scream and shout, yes, it is not ideal. However, the way I look at it, once I have left the sacrifice there for a day and come back and left a new one, then the energy of that sacrifice has already been taken by the gods. And as such, what is left is just waste. I personally do not eat food that I've left as a sacrifice because for me, part of the point of it being a sacrifice is that I give it to the gods, and as such, that will not that doesn't fit very well with then taking it and eating it myself. But that's by no means the only way you can look at it. For example, in Viking culture, sacrifices were generally eaten afterwards. I'll get back to that. Anyway, for me, saving it doesn't work, so I toss it. And generally, garbage to become earth eventually, so I don't see it as a horrible way to dispose of sacrifices. Now, it's a much more ideal way if you can dig it down or burn it. And some might see it that it's disrespectful to just dispose of it. But when you live in an urban environment, you have to do what you have to do. A lot of these practices and advice and traditions of how to do things has been developed in areas where you have easy access to forest, have a garden, have a fireplace, have all these things. But the truth is that today a lot of people don't have easy access to this. And if I was going to get to a forested area, I would probably have to take the bus. It would take me at least an hour to get here out of forested area and back again, and I just can't do that every day to dispose of a sacrifice. So for me, I use this solution, and I think one of the most important things my teacher taught me was that do it as best as you can. If you have to use an unideal solution, then use an unideal solution. Because it's better than not doing anything. It's better for me to dispose of the sacrifice in the garbage than it is for me to not do these rituals. But yes, if you have easier access to somewhere, or if you don't leave sacrifices very often, or if you generally sacrifice things that will easily be absorbed by plants and such, then for example, digging it down into potted plants or saving it up and then going in basically perhaps a trip a week to dispose of it is a better solution. The most ideal is if you live near a countryside and you can just have a sacred place in your garden where you dig down sacrifices or you burn them. The second most ideal is to use potted plants and such, but then you have to have volume, because your one single cactus is not going to be happy if you leave a cup of rice in its soil every day. Besides, there's a lot of things that doesn't break down that easily, such as, for example, rice, which do break down eventually, but not as easy as a lot of other things. Or you can there's a lot of things that you can do, or you can, like I said, save it up if that's easier. Now you have to remember, when disposing of something in nature, you have to make sure that it's something that won't harm it. For example, salt can be very harmful for the plant life, so it should not be disposed of in nature. You have to check, you can easily do that on the internet, the nature of what you are sacrificing. So, I should also talk about whether or not you can actually eat or use what you have sacrificed. For me, I don't do it, because the point of it being a sacrifice is that I give it, and as such, if I used it, for me it would be like I'm taking it back. And also I think that once the gods have consumed the energy of these things, there aren't much nourishment left in them. There might be if you just check it in a laboratory, but I think that energy-wise and such, there's not much left. But a lot of culture did actually eat it. For example, when Vikings had blood, they would sacrifice a bull or another animal, and that animal were then eaten at the following feast, because it was the life of that bull that was sacrificed. So I can certainly see how you could sacrifice a bowl of rice and then cook it and eat it later. But for me, if you do something like that, that's more like dedicating that rice to the gods than it is sacrificing it to them. So, and of course somebody will always ask, what do pagans today and generally occultists sacrifice? Well, for me, it generally goes into rice. I feel rice has a nice energy. Milk, wine, honey. Some gods have specific things they like, but that's a general thing. Holy water as in salted water. Flowers. And gemstones is, generally speaking, the things I sacrifice. The sacrifice can be anything. Sometimes it has to be something that's deeply meaningful to you. For example, when I was a kid, I was doing a spell, not a very good one, but a spell nonetheless. And as a sacrifice for it, I had a favorite headband, and I broke it and tossed it, because then I gave that thing that I really, really, really liked as a gift to the forces and gods for help with my spell. A sacrifice can also be work done. For example, you can have going out and helping a nature conservation group do something good for nature as a sacrifice, because then you're sacrificing your time, or help out at a homeless shelter or something like that, help out by reading for the elderly, doing some sort of good deed where you sacrifice your time. And within some systems too, you can also sacrifice physical pain. It is sometimes used among traditional Wiccans, more commonly used among sex magicians and such, where you, for example, whip yourself as a sacrifice, where you sacrifice your discomfort. Anything really where you give something can be a sacrifice. And I guess that for a lot of people that live in an urban environment, they might feel that it's better to have a non-physical sacrifice than to have to dispose of that sacrifice in the garbage. For example, they might want to, instead of leaving a bowl of rice, they might sit down and meditate and send energy to the gods instead. Or they might light a candle and have that candle as a sacrifice, so that there's nothing left to dispose of. For me, I really like the idea of leaving something tactile, a bowl of rice, within the ritual. But I can also see that if you are icked out about the idea of disposing a sacrifice in a non-ideal way, then yes, sending energy, or for example, having candles that you anoint and having that oil and candle being the sacrifice, can also be a very good solution for you. And I think that both nature and humanity, and well, animals too for that matter, can help out. That's an animal shelter. Basically, that doing good deeds can be a very good sacrifice to the gods, and that doesn't need to be disposed of. But yes, I really feel that you do what you can do. It's like if you can't afford to have a silver dagger made of to such and such proportions, and so on and so forth, for a specific ritual, have a silver-coated one. If you can't afford a silver-coated one, have a steel one. If you can't afford anything but a plastic knife from McDonald's, use that. Basically, do it as good as you can. But at the end of the day, it's your intentions that matter. So yeah, I hope this video has been in any way helpful. Have a great day, and blessed be.